Disruptive climate change isn't a distant threat to Britain, it's already here. Well, that's according to a new report by the Royal Meteorological Society, which says the UK is experiencing more extreme weather such as heat waves, storms and floods. The UK's climate has continued to warm, with 2020 marking the first time that heat, rainfall and sunshine hit top 10 levels in the same year. Last year was the third warmest, fifth wettest and eighth sunniest on record. Experts also say that in the space of 30 years, the UK has become 0.9 degrees Celsius warmer. They say the warming trend can be seen not only during the summer, but throughout the year and right across the country. And as well as increased temperatures, the UK has been on average 6% wetter over the last 30 years than the 30 before that. 6 of the 10 wettest years on record have taken place since 1998. Well, Dr. Ella Gilbert is a climate scientist at the University of Reading, and she joins us on the programme now. Thanks for being with us on the programme, Dr. Gilbert. So this report suggests that climate change is already affecting our weather in the UK. Put this into context for us. Is it as bad as this suggests?
Absolutely. I mean, year on year, we hear these facts and figures about this year being the warmest on record. And to be quite honest, this is very much likely to continue. The top 10 warmest years have all been since 2002. 2020 closed the warmest decade on record. And if we flip that on its head, this is probably the coldest it's going to be from now on.
So how much of the extreme conditions that we're seeing worldwide at the moment can be put down to climate change?
Well, we know that climate change causes extreme events like flooding, like storms, like heat waves, like droughts to become more intense and to happen more frequently. So it's very likely that we'll see even more of these kinds of extreme events happening more frequently in the future. Something that might happen once every 100 years, for instance, now will be more likely to happen every 10 years or so by the end of the century. So, you know, things like the Pacific heat dome that saw those absolutely astonishing temperatures in Canada and the USA just a few weeks ago, whilst they won't be likely to happen very often, they're going to be much more likely to happen more frequently. So these sorts of extreme events can be expected to happen more often, and also for those actual extremes to be more extreme.
So have climate scientists been surprised about these extreme weather events?
Well, this is in line with expectation. This is what scientists have been suggesting will happen for quite some years. There's currently an approval meeting going on for the IPCC, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a consensus essentially of climate scientists from around the world. And there's a report coming out in the next year or so that brings together all of the climate science from around the world for the last kind of 7 years or so and synthesizes where we are in terms of the climate science. So right now, the authors of the report that covers the kind of physical mechanisms of climate change are meeting to approve line by line this report. So this reflects the kind of state of our understanding about the climate. We know that extreme events are going to become more likely, and we're unsurprised that they are already becoming more likely. And it just makes it even more important that we continue to mitigate, or do more, in fact, to mitigate our impact on the climate.
So when it comes to infrastructure or city planning, what can be done worldwide to deal with the changing climate?
Well, we're going to have to adapt to our changing climate, of course. We're going to have to think about flood defences. So I live in London, and the Thames Barrier was designed in the 70s, I believe. So that's obviously going to have to be changed as our sea levels rise and as our climate warms. But across the world, there are so many countries where adaptation is something that's going to be even more pressing. Countries where the sea level is rising really rapidly and have less resources and means to adapt and mitigate those impacts. So we're all going to have to do our bit to adapt to, and also, importantly, we really need to prevent the worst effects happening by doing what we can now to mitigate and to prevent the worst effects of climate change by reducing our emissions and doing everything we can to minimise our impact.
So reducing emissions is something we talk about a lot when it comes to dealing with climate change. But politically, what other measures do you think we need to see to try and mitigate these events that we're now seeing?
Well, I think the primary thing for me is that the pledges and targets that have been kind of made and set out in the last few years as part of the negotiations, for instance, in Glasgow that's going on later this year, all of those pledges and targets are great, but they need to be implemented, and they need to put their money where their mouth is, essentially, and set out a roadmap for actually achieving those targets so that we absolutely do limit warming to at an absolute maximum 2 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures.
And do you think, obviously the political narrative is very important here, but do you think that has somewhat changed given these extreme weather events we are now seeing on a more regular basis?
I think yes, because it's important that people understand that climate change isn't happening at some distant point in the future to somebody else in a different place. It's happening now, it's happening here, and it's happening to all of us. I mean, the flooding in Belgium and Germany just really pinpoints that, and the same with the heat waves and the floods that we see in the UK year after year, it seems. So climate change is here, and it's here to stay, unfortunately. So that is really shaping the political narrative, and that's only a good thing.
Dr. Ella Gilbert from the University of Reading, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme today.
Thank you.